Lin-Manuel Miranda is the director of Netflix's Tick, Tick, Boom. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Lynn, it's a real pleasure to talk to you today. I want to start by asking you about your personal experience with Jonathan Larson's work, dating all the way back to your teenage years when you saw Rent for the first time, and then a little bit later when you saw Tick, Tick, Boom. What was it about those two shows, a moment or a song, or just how innovative they were in the form that really changed your life and made you say, you know, this is really what I want to do with my career?
I've spoken at length in other places about how innovative those shows were, you know, how diverse, how John threaded the needle between pop and rock music and musical theater traditions. That's all stuff I have tried to carry into my own work as a writer. So I don't have to go into that length. In terms of specific moments, I mean, the fact that I wanted to write songs and make movies, and the main characters, Mark and Roger, are making movies and writing songs, I felt like both of them in equal measure. But there's a moment in Act Two where they get in a fight, and Roger calls out Mark, and Mark is the filmmaker, and he says, "You pretend to create and observe when you really detach from feeling alive." And it talks about how he hides in his work and how he always has that camera on instead of actually living. And that was a pretty good description of what I was doing in high school. I found it easier to be the friend with the camcorder filming the shenanigans than engaging in the shenanigans. So it really kind of, in addition to just being a groundbreaking musical, it invited me to participate more fully in my own life. And you know, all of Tick, Tick, Boom, when I saw that my senior year of college, just hit me like a ton of bricks. The fact that this group of friends was having to make choices in terms of whether to, you know, continue to pursue that childhood dream or grow up and find other routes to happiness. Because that's the thing we tried to give greater balance to in the film version of Tick, Tick, Boom, is like, Susan's not wrong for wanting to dance outside of New York. Being in New York does not define you as an artist. That's true. That has the benefit of being true. And, you know, Michael has his own reasons for finding safety and health insurance in a job that still allows him to be creative. Like, that is another road to happiness. It's not this binary that Jonathan so often defined it as like, you're doing it or you're selling out. And so, you know, it was, Tick, Tick, Boom hit me with the force of a ton of bricks. It was a sneak preview of what my 20s would look like as a struggling songwriter with revolving door roommates of my own. And it also strengthened my resolve to really try to do this.
Yeah, it feels like such an incredibly fitting first film for you as a director, just because of how much, you know, you have such a unique and rare insight into Jonathan's life as a composer yourself. So I was just wondering, how does that experience, your own experience writing your first musical in your 20s, help you translate Jonathan's emotions to the screen? Not just, you know, resonate with you, but help you understand how to best kind of carry that onto the screen.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I think the biggest insight I felt I could bring was, I understand what that pressure feels like when you've got a whole show in your head, and the gulf between it existing in your head and it existing in any form on a stage where an audience can see it. Because we're not novelists, we can't self-publish, we're not painters, we don't just need a brush and some paper, or, you know, there's a lot of obstacles between our art form and its execution. And so you need actors who believe in it. You need collaborators who will make your work better. You need producers who believe in your vision. You need a theater. And that tension was one I understood innately. And then the other thing that was just a fun investigation for me that I consider sort of a side mission inside the film is a real interrogation and investigation of John's songwriting process, which was very different from my songwriting process as a songwriter. John did this thing, and Mark Eden Horowitz at the Library of Congress identified it. And then once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. He would ask himself questions. He would literally write a big question, like a capital B big question on a piece of paper, and write his way to the answer through song. The most famous example is not in our movie, it's in Rent. How do you measure a year? 52 weeks, 365 days, circled 5 times, 525,600 minutes, and then lists, sunsets, cups of coffee, discarded lyrics as he figures out how to do that. And I think it's so fitting and heartbreaking and poignant that the last song in Tick, Tick, Boom, every lyric's a question. Because that's exactly where Jonathan was. He was dusting himself off from mourning the loss of Superbia and subsequently his 20s. And he had to get back up and write the next one. And the next one would ultimately be Rent. But he's not even there yet. So that's very inspiring to me, because it's really, this is a movie about getting back up. And it's also, I got to sort of play in the sandbox of Jonathan's brain in terms of how he found the music that he made.
Yeah, it is a really incredibly good use of those archival materials. I know you were working with, footage that you show over the credits and archival material, and with his sister, Julie Larson. So it really does feel like it's pulling all of those different threads together to expand the universe of the Tick, Tick, Boom stage musical. I did want to ask you about your experience working with Rob Marshall. I know you've said that Chicago is kind of the gold standard of how to translate a musical from stage to screen, and you had the chance to work with him on Mary Poppins Returns, and also working with John M. Chu on your own film adaptation of In the Heights. What kind of lessons did you learn from observing them that you wanted to use when you're directing your first, not only your first film, but a movie musical too?
Yeah, I had really good role models in that sense. I wanted to get on film sets that would show me how better to do what I was ultimately preparing to do with this film. Excuse me. With Rob, first of all, Rob makes you feel like $1 million. He is so good at empowering actors and really rehearsing. Like what he does, I think, better than anyone is he brings the rigor of theater and rehearsal to the screen. And if you are signing up to do a Rob Marshall movie, you're going to do months of rehearsal before there's a camera anywhere near the place. And that was the perfect training wheels for me as an actor transitioning from theater into film. But also it empowers your actor to give input. It makes you feel like, oh, I'm here because Rob believes in me. And if Rob believes in me, then I deserve to be here. And really that investment of time and resources in terms of making you your best self. And that's exactly what I insisted on, like that level of rehearsal. We did 1.5 years of workshops, like we were doing a musical, like a stage musical. And that's directly from the Rob Marshall School, because I remember the week-long stage reading we did of Mary Poppins Returns at the New Amsterdam Theater offices a year before we did anything with a camera. And then John M. Chu is just the biggest dreamer I've ever met. He has incredible collaborators. He really makes the kind of room where the best idea in the room wins. And more than anybody I've seen is he's able to rigorously prepare for an elaborate sequence and keep his eyes open for where the magic is coming from on a given day. A great example is the opening number of In the Heights. Like, you see how elaborate that number is. We've got 100 dancers on 175th Street. And also on the day he's filming in this building, he sees the superintendent and goes, will you stand by this window and look out the window? Because he just is in love with the super and the way the super occupies the space of his own building. And the shot that makes me cry every time is the shot of the super, like holding his mop and looking out the window. So again, it's that ability to calibrate and like plan for everything, but also calibrate and adjust for the best idea in the room. And so I really tried to take that, and they both just run happy, positive sets. Like not a screamer in the bunch. So like you want to create a fertile playground. And I learned that from both of them.
Yeah, I mean, the scales of the two films are quite different, of In the Heights and Tick, Tick, Boom, obviously. But one thing that I see carrying over both, and I really love about Tick, Tick, Boom, is how dynamic the musical numbers are. Something that started as a rock monologue and then a stage musical for 3 characters has really opened up in such an incredible way. Like in 3090, we start in the New York Theater Workshop, but we're in the apartment, we're in the Strand. So just wanted to ask you about your approach to kind of opening up these musicals and really embracing as a director, the flexibility of cinema and the mobility of the camera.
Yeah, as soon as Julie O came to me with the film rights, and it's really she saw it as a movie before I did, and I have to give her all the credit in the world for that. My first idea was, the rock monologue is the frame, because you need a frame. You need a way to negotiate that relationship to song with the audience, because movies look more like real life than stage productions do. So you've got a higher threshold of disbelief to bridge. And so we really peel it back gradually for you. It starts as a diegetic musical number. He is singing at a piano. He is accompanying himself. The band joins in. And then we cut to that first scene in the diner, and it looks pretty naturalistic, but the music from New York Theater Workshop hasn't stopped. So we're still very much in the number. And then when we cut back for that second chorus, it's two of the same characters from that diner scene, but now we're in the apartment and we're singing. And so we're kind of just bit by bit. And then by the end of the number, they're like singing and kicking all over the Strand and but we've gotten you there gradually. Like first we see a very naturalistic scene with Susan in the Strand, cut back to New York Theater Workshop for like 2 seconds just for Vanessa to get off the stool. And now the Strand can sing. So it's slowly getting the audience to realize that, like, if Jonathan is singing, we are in the world according to Jonathan Larson, and it's all highly subjective. So if he wants to, create Black Thought as the avatar for this hip hop number, he can do that for us. If he wants to populate his diner with the greatest legends in the history of Broadway, he reserves the right to do that. And something I learned on Hamilton that I brought to Tick Tick was there's the truism that the opening number teaches you how to watch the show. And that is 100% true. It's the most important number in your musical. But with Hamilton, I also learned that every number is a chance to push on that contract and renegotiate it. So it's not until Helpless and Satisfied that we raise our hand and go, we reserve the right to stop time and reverse it if necessary. We've already established that whoever's closest to Hamilton can be the narrator within a given song, but we're also going to play with time. And in this song, we're just going to tell you a lot of rules about dueling, because you don't do it anymore, but we used to do it. Also that, and we're building all of those foundations so that when we get to the final number, we can stop a bullet, like freeze time and explode a moment and not have to explain it, because we've renegotiated it and expanded our musical relationship with the audience. And I tried to bring that to Tick Tick Boom as well. Like every song is an opportunity to expand on that relationship.
Yeah, no question. I mean, that is working across therapy and come to your senses in all different ways. And it's really effective. You just mentioned the kind of all-star cast of Broadway stars that you assembled for Sunday. And I have to ask you about the beautiful Sunday sequence. First, what I wanted to know is, and I think you've said this elsewhere, that it was really imagined as, in this kind of rock monologue with just Jonathan performing it. And you have the opportunity and also the responsibility of realizing his vision in the most, beautiful way possible. So what was your thought behind, how do I want to take this homage to Stephen Sondheim's Sunday in the Park with George and, do it as beautifully and as grand as possible?
Yeah, it's two homages at once, right? There's John honoring Steve, and then there's me honoring John, but I can't honor John without also honoring Steve. And so my opportunity as a filmmaker is to take Jonathan's solo and turn it into a choir. I can make his song, which he only ever heard with himself at a piano, as full as the end of Act 1 of Sunday in the Park with George. And so to that end, I can't just get any old singers. I need to get Jonathan Larson's dream choir. And so beginning with Bernadette Peters, who would be the first person John imagined to be in this sequence, and then building outwards from there. And then also kind of building this galaxy brain moment that kind of exists outside of time, because Jonathan is also bringing in collaborators he hasn't met yet. He's bringing in some of the Rent cast. He's bringing in shows that owe a debt to rent, like Hamilton and Fun Home, which are both represented in the actors you see in the sequence. And then also giving just again, like, and it has to work if you don't know any of those. Because like, this is not inside baseball. Like, it needs to just work as a sequence, full stop. We show you a little bit of Sunday in the Park with George on the TV just to give a little context to it, to someone who might not be familiar with it. But it's got to just work as a number, full stop. And then how deep do you want to go down the rabbit hole of references inside it? Yeah, like, yep, Joel Grey is holding his cane from Cabaret. Like there's Cheetah with a vodka stinger, like one of the ladies who lunch. There's BB in her sort of Chicago era nightdress. But again, for me, one of the most important gestures in the number actually has nothing to do with any of the sort of legends. It's when John grabs Freddie, who we've just heard is sick in the hospital, and puts him in the picture, because that is what John will ultimately do. He's going to take his community and his friends, and he's going to put them on the same Broadway stage as the rest of these legends.
Yeah, that's a beautiful and touching moment. And speaking of, before we move on to some of the other projects you've done this year, I do just have to ask you about the voicemail from Stephen Sondheim in the film. We know the origins of how that came about, and that, yes, that is Steve Sondheim on the voicemail. But I just wanted to ask you, when you think about that scene now, or if you've rewatched it in the last, week or two with Steve's passing, how does that feel, that kind of like a final gift from Steve in this film? And also, can you think of any moments, I know he mentored you a bit, any moments like that where, a small gesture meant so much?
Yeah, well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't rewatched it since his passing. It will be tough. My last interaction with him was about that scene. And I'm really grateful that it was one full of love. It was just, I emailed him and was like, I hope your ears are burning, because a great side effect of being the director of Tick, Tick, Boom is people tell me their Sondheim mentorship stories. And you've mentored so many of us, and we're so grateful. And he wrote me back saying he felt really proud of that part of his legacy. And I'm sure that voicemail has extra resonance now, because it's not just an encouragement to the real Jonathan Larson, the Jonathan Larson in our film. It's an encouragement to all of us to keep going and be proud. There's a moment early in the movie where, Steve tells John, first-rate lyric and tune, and he says that was enough to keep him going for the next 2 years. My version of that is really the first time I met Steve as an adult. I was there to meet with him about Spanish language translations for a revival of West Side Story. And that part of the meeting was 5 minutes. He was just like, make it rhyme in the same places. I don't speak Spanish. But my ear is gonna hear if it doesn't rhyme in the right places. So that was a very fast conversation. And then he said, what else are you working on? And I told him I'm working on this concept album about Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. And he threw back his head and roared and just said, that is so fantastic. No one will expect that from you. That's exactly what you should be doing. And it was so emphatic, and just, I think he was happy to be surprised. And that's so much of what his work gives us, is just like, every time you think he's going to zig, he zags in his scores and in his choices. And so that laugh powered 3 years of writing Hamilton. I was like, all right, well, I got Stephen Sondheim, and he said, that's exactly what you should be doing. And that was enough. That's like a nitro booster. So I know he did that for many, many other, I'm one of thousands, but I'm grateful for it nonetheless.
Absolutely. We mentioned a little bit earlier, In the Heights, a big, beautiful screen adaptation of your first musical. But I also wanted to ask you a question about your two animated films this year, Encanto and Vivo. Yeah. Just what lessons did you take from Moana, your first animated film? I think that was your first animated film. Take from that film and kind of help you understand how to score for these movies, write original songs, and just what about these two films touches you?
Sure. It's a great question. I had such a joyous time on Moana that I raised my hand for Encanto, honestly, because on a simple level, I saw how seriously Disney took their responsibility of representing a part of the world when they set a movie there. They know that's going to be in the minds of millions of children, like their first representation of that place. And, you know, I did my deep dive into Pacific Island culture and music. And there were a lot of folks keeping me honest in terms of representing that musical landscape well. And I wanted that for Latin America. I just wanted that experience for us and for our people. And so I said, if you're ever doing a Latin themed animated musical, like it's like all my life I've been prepping for this. And then Vivo is an interesting case because it actually both predates Moana and comes after Moana. I've been working on that in the wake of In the Heights in 2009 with another animation company. I wrote a bunch of songs, but it never got past the development phase. And then I got the joy of kind of a mini In the Heights reunion when we started back up. You know, Kiara had a totally fresh take for what it could be, using the songs I'd written. We realized pretty quickly I'm a much better writer than I was in 2009. So I don't think there's one song from that original development process that I didn't completely rewrite. And to work with my friends again, honestly, to work with Kiara and to be a part of Alex Lackamore's first film score. I know it will not be his last score because he's insanely gifted. But, you know, this movie takes place in Cuba and Miami, two landscapes that he breathes in and breathes out. And so that was a joy to facilitate that and be a part of that. And I also just think that Encanto's it's really sophisticated. It's like my most sophisticated writing so far, like in terms of balancing themes and the complexity of those relationships and finding musical ways to deepen those relationships. It was a really fun That's what was exciting about it, was like the way we pitch this movie. You can't write the typical Disney score. Like there is no sidekick, there is no villain, they don't get songs. There's just you just have to throw out the playbook because we're staying under one roof, we're staying with this family, and the complexity of their relationships is the meat of it. And so finding new song forms for those moments and finding ways to musically kind of complexify those relationships was just really, really fun.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, congratulations on Tick Tick Boom. Congratulations on all of these projects this year. And thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you.